Beulah Jackson is lying in a hospital bed. Ten Petal Ranch has no real leader. And the man who just inherited the most powerful ranching dynasty in South Texas has never once earned the respect of a single person standing on that land. That is not a leadership transition. That is a slow-motion collapse. And while the Jackson family is cracking from the inside, Rip Wheeler is quietly hunting someone who is still inside Rio Paloma right now. Someone trusted, someone close, someone who handed the enemy exactly what they needed to strike. Episode 9 is not coming to slow things down. It is coming to finish what Episode 8 started. And nothing is going to look the same on the other side of it. There are moments in a story where you can feel everything shifting beneath the surface. Not the loud, explosive moments that everyone sees coming. The quiet ones. The ones where a single wrong decision, a single betrayal, a single name spoken at the wrong time sets off a chain of events that nobody can pull back. Episode 9 of Dutton Ranch is one of those moments. Everything that has been building across this entire season, the ranch war, the family fractures, the hidden loyalties, the financial conspiracy running underneath all of it, is now pointed at a single breaking point. And before this episode is over, every character in this story is going to be forced to show exactly who they are when the options run out and there is nowhere left to hide. To understand why Episode 9 lands as hard as it does, you have to feel the full weight of what happened before it. Because what went down in the episodes leading here was not just dramatic television, it was the kind of turning point that permanently rewires an entire season. Beulah Jackson did not collapse because she was weak. She collapsed because someone made absolutely sure that when the moment came, she had no real choice left. That is a completely different thing. And the story wants you to feel that difference in your chest. Beulah built Ten Petal Ranch across decades of sacrifice. She poured her loyalty, her instincts, and her understanding of the land into every decision she made. She knew which son had the patience to lead. She knew which one had the hunger for the wrong things. She had a plan. And someone dismantled that plan piece by piece until the only exit left was the one that handed control to Rob Will. In her most cornered, most vulnerable moment, with everything she built on the line, Beulah was pressured into naming the wrong heir. And the second those words left her mouth, her body gave out. That is the story telling you something in the clearest possible language. That was not a health event. That was a woman breaking under the weight of a moment she never should have been forced into. Now she is in a hospital bed, fighting. And the ranch she held together through everything is sitting wide open with a man in charge who was never supposed to be there. Rob Will has the title now. He has the authority on paper. But paper means nothing when the people around you look through you instead of at you. Rob Will has never been the kind of leader who builds loyalty. He demands it. He expects it as though it is something that simply arrives with the position. And ranches do not work that way. Ranches are built on something much older and much harder than authority. They are built on the kind of trust that comes from years of showing up, making the right calls under pressure, and treating the people who keep the land alive as partners rather than tools. Rob Will does not have that foundation. He never built it. And now he is standing at the head of a ranch that is already in the middle of a war, with workers who know exactly what happened and who is missing from that seat. That gap between the title and the reality of what he is walking into is where Episode 9 begins to tear things apart. Because Rob Will is not the kind of man who sits still and assesses. He moves, he acts, he makes decisions quickly, and his first moves as the man in charge are going to reveal everything about what kind of leader he truly is under pressure. Early signals are not encouraging. The decisions coming out of that power shift point towards someone who is more focused on asserting dominance than understanding the complexity of what he is now responsible for. And in a ranch war, that instinct, that need to be seen as powerful rather than smart, is not a leadership style. It is a vulnerability. It is exactly the kind of crack that a strategic enemy looks for and exploits. While Rob Will is overplaying his hand, his brother Wacken is running out of time. Wacken was the son Beulah actually trusted. He is steady in the way that only comes from genuine connection to something larger than yourself. He loves the land. He understands the legacy. He is the kind of man who earns what he has rather than taking it. And right now, he is watching his brother dismantle everything their mother spent her life building, one reckless decision at a time. Wacken cannot stay in the middle much longer. The space between silence and confrontation is shrinking with every move Rob will makes, and the decision Wacken is approaching, stay quiet and watch the damage pile up, or challenge his brother and risk splitting the family completely at the worst possible moment, is the kind of decision that defines a man forever. There is no clean answer. There is no path through this that does not cost something real. But doing nothing is also a choice. And in this world, at this moment, silence has consequences just as heavy as action. What makes all of this so dangerous for 10 Petal Ranch is the timing. This is not a family working through a transition during a period of stability. This is a leadership collapse happening in the middle of a war. The Duttons are watching. Beth is watching. And if there is a fracture forming inside the Jackson family, you can be absolutely certain that every crack is being noted, measured, and filed away for exactly the right moment. The attack on Rio Paloma was not random. That point cannot be stressed enough, because once you truly sit with what that means, the entire threat facing the Duttons changes shape entirely. This was not a group of strangers who stumbled onto the property and made a bad decision. The evidence that Rip Wheeler is now methodically pulling apart tells a completely different story. It tells the story of someone who knew the ranch, someone who understood the routines, the schedules, the exact windows when security thinned and the gates sat most exposed. Someone who had that level of access not because they forced it, but because they were trusted with it. That person is still inside Rio Paloma right now. Rip Wheeler in episode 9 is not the man most people expect when they think about how he handles a threat. Most of the time, when someone comes at the people he loves, Rip reacts. That is his nature. That has always been the engine that drives him. Immediate, physical, absolute. But what is happening in this episode is different in a way that should genuinely frighten anyone who finds themselves in his sights. Rip is not reacting. He has shifted into something quieter, something colder, something that only appears when a man has decided that anger alone is not the right tool for what he is dealing with. He is thinking, he is building, and he is doing it with the kind of focused patience that most people who know him have never seen before. What Rip is constructing right now is a profile. He is piecing together every detail of the attack with a methodical precision that does not look like grief and does not look like rage. It looks like a man solving a problem that has a specific, correct answer. Who on the inside had the access that made this possible? Who knew the layout well enough to map it for an outside attack? Who had a reason, however hidden, however buried, to want Rio Paloma to fail? And every answer he gets is narrowing that list. Every piece of information is bringing him closer to a name that is going to change everything about how the back half of this season plays out. This is what makes Rip so dangerous in episode 9. It is not his strength, it is not his history of what he is capable of when pushed past a limit. It is his patience. An angry Rip Wheeler is dangerous the way a storm is dangerous. Loud, immediate, destructive. But a quiet Rip Wheeler, a focused one, a Rip Wheeler who is hunting rather than reacting, that is something different entirely. Storms pass. Hunters do not stop. And when Rip finds the person responsible for this, and he is going to find them, there will be no warning. There will be no confrontation staged in front of witnesses where someone gets the opportunity to explain themselves or appeal to mercy. There will simply be a reckoning, the kind that does not leave room for second chances or undue buttons. While Rip is working from the inside out, tracing the physical thread of who carried out the attack, Beth Dutton is working from an entirely different direction. And if you understand how Beth thinks, if you have watched her operate across every season of this story, you already know that she is not interested in who pulled the trigger. She has never been interested in that. What Beth is interested in is who gave the order and why. Because that is where the real danger lives. That is where the real power sits. And that is the only place where destroying the threat completely becomes possible, rather than just temporarily. Beth has understood something about violence for her entire life. The act itself, the attack, the destruction, the chaos that everyone else is still reacting to, that is never the actual story. That is the surface. Underneath every act of violence in a war like this one, there is a financial motive. There is a deal, a contract, a piece of land that someone decided was worth more than the people currently standing on it. There is money moving somewhere, and if you know how to follow it, really follow it, through the quiet back channels and the paper trails that most people do not even know exist, you find the person who made the decision long before the first shot was fired. Beth knows exactly how to do this. She has spent her entire life learning how to read a land contract the way most people read a street map. She knows where the pressure points hide inside a business arrangement. She knows how to find the clauses buried deep enough that most people skip past them. She knows about the side agreements, the handshakes that never get written down but still drive every major decision. These are the instruments of real power in the world Beth grew up in, and she has always been more fluent in them than anyone who ever underestimated her. Right now, she is applying every one of those skills to Rio Paloma and to the attack that someone orchestrated with far too much precision to have been improvised. The questions Beth is asking are not about who moved first. She is asking who benefits if the Duttons fail in Texas, who profits if Rio Paloma gets broken apart, swallowed, or forced into a sale that nobody asked for, who has been quietly positioning themselves to move in the moment Beth and Rip are pushed far enough back that the land opens up. Because someone looked at Rio Paloma, looked at the Duttons trying to plant themselves in South Texas after everything they lost in Montana, and made a strategic decision that they needed to be removed. That kind of decision does not come from emotion. It does not come from a ranch rivalry that got out of hand. It comes from someone who drew up a plan, identified the obstacles, and started removing them one by one. And that level of thinking leaves traces. Financial traces. Legal traces. The kind of faint but real markers that disappear to most eyes but light up like signals to someone who knows what they are looking for. Beth is following those signals right now, and what she is finding is pointing somewhere more organized and more powerful than a simple neighbor dispute over fence lines. This goes deeper. This connects to money at a level that suggests whoever is behind it has resources, has relationships, and has been patient enough to move slowly and carefully while keeping their name completely off the surface of everything they have set in motion. That kind of operation requires sophistication. And it also requires a weakness. Because every complex financial arrangement has one. Every hidden structure has a point where the weight becomes too concentrated, where one exposed thread pulls the entire thing apart. Beth Dutton is the one person in this story built to find that thread. What is so powerful about how Beth and Rip are moving in this episode is that they are not coordinating. They are not sitting down together and mapping out a shared strategy. They are each following a completely separate line. Rip pulling the thread of who carried out the attack, Beth pulling the thread of who ordered it. And somewhere ahead of where they both are right now, those two threads connect at the same name, at the same person. The moment the convergence happens, when Rip's investigation and Beth's financial dismantling arrive at the exact same answer simultaneously, the person at the center of all of this is going to have nothing left. No escape route, no cover story, no financial buffer thick enough to protect them. They will not just be facing Rip Wheeler's version of justice, they will be facing Beth Dutton's precision. And that combination, that specific pairing of instinct and intelligence, of force and strategy, has never once failed to destroy what stands in front of it. While everything outside is moving toward a confrontation that will reshape the entire war, the most emotionally raw story in Episode 9 is happening much closer to home. Carter Green, the boy that Beth and Rip took in and raised as their own, is falling apart. And the timing of it could not be worse. Because the last thing this family needs right now, with an inside traitor still unidentified and a financial conspiracy still being traced, is for one of their own to be coming apart at the seams in a way that makes him unpredictable. Carter has been carrying more grief than most adults could handle long before any of this began. Losing Dwight earlier this season created a wound that never properly healed. Dwight was not just a friend to Carter in the casual sense. He was someone who understood Carter in the particular way that only another person who has navigated the same brutal world can understand you. Someone who made the rawness and the violence and the loneliness of ranch life feel slightly less isolating. That loss carved something out of Carter that has not grown back. And instead of being given real time to grieve, Carter moved forward the only way this world seems to allow, by pushing through, by staying present, by pretending that the weight was manageable. Then came Oriana, and for a while, it felt like something real, something genuine in the middle of all the chaos surrounding his life. Carter opened up in the way that young men only open up when they believe the person across from them is truly on their side. He was vulnerable. He trusted her with real parts of himself, the parts that most people never see because showing them is too dangerous. He believed that what they had was standing outside the war, separate from the sides and the loyalties and the complicated machinery of everything pulling at every person around him. He was wrong, and finding out exactly how wrong he was did not just hurt him. It humiliated him, because every moment he opened up, every moment he trusted her with something real, he was being observed by the wrong side. His vulnerability was not protected. It was filed away. And now that it has all collapsed, Carter is not just carrying heartbreak. He is carrying the specific, suffocating shame of having been used, of having handed the enemy something real and watched them treat it like a resource. The result is a young man who is drinking through the pain, isolating, sitting inside his own head at a moment when the people who love him most need him present and sharp. And the official description for episode 9 places Carter directly at a crossroads, a word that is carrying enormous weight in this story, because the choice Carter makes in this episode is not just about him. It is about what kind of man he is becoming. Every person in this family has a version of this story. Every person who ever became someone in this world had a moment where everything fell apart at once, and they had to decide whether to let it hollow them out or use it to build something harder and more resilient inside themselves. Rip Wheeler did not become who he is by luck or by accident. He became that man through a series of the hardest choices imaginable, made in the darkest moments, when no one was watching and there was no guarantee that the right choice would be rewarded. Carter is standing at the exact same kind of moment right now, not a version of it, the same one. And the people around him, Beth especially, can see it. Beth has been watching Carter with the particular attention of someone who understands exactly what it costs a person to survive this kind of world intact. She knows what it feels like to be hurt by someone you trusted completely. She knows what it looks like when the pain starts to curdle into something dangerous. And she knows that the next few decisions Carter makes are going to set the direction of who he becomes in a way that may not be correctable later. The crossroads the story is placing him at is real, and the path he chooses is going to send a signal to Beth, to Rip, to every person at Rio Paloma watching how a young man responds when the world stops being manageable. The question is whether Carter finds a way through this that does not cost him the one thing this family needs from him most right now: his presence, his clarity, his willingness to show up for the people who chose him when nobody else did. To feel the full weight of what is happening in episode 9, you have to step back from the immediate war and look at the history underneath it. Because Dutton Ranch is not a show about a property dispute in South Texas. It is the continuation of a family story that stretches back over 140 years. And every single battle Beth and Rip are fighting right now carries every generation that came before them like weight tied around their shoulders that they were born into and cannot put down. It started in the 1880s. James and Margaret Dutton loaded everything they owned into a wagon and crossed the most hostile, unforgiving land in America because they believed, they had to believe, that somewhere on the other side of all that suffering, there was a place worth building a life on. They built the original Yellowstone Ranch in Montana from nothing. And the price they paid for it was devastating in a way that went beyond land or money or opposition from enemies. They buried people they loved along the way. Their daughter Elsa, a loss so deep and so formative that it never fully left the Dutton family story even generations later. But they kept going, because stopping was not something in their nature. Quitting was never once an option, no matter how many times the land or the people on it tried to break them. Then came Jacob and Kara Dutton, who took what James and Margaret built and expanded it into something with deep enough roots that it could survive what came next. They survived the Great Depression when ranches all around them were failing and folding and disappearing into history. They survived land-hungry enemies who came at them carrying lawyers and leverage and quiet institutional power designed to outlast individual resistance. They survived the kind of internal fractures that collapse most families. And they came out of it not just intact, but stronger. Jacob and Kara did not simply protect what they inherited. They transformed it into a legacy, into something rooted deeply enough that no single disaster could pull it completely from the ground. And that legacy moved forward, generation by generation, carrying both the strength and the accumulated trauma of every fight that came before it. Then came John Dutton III, the version of this family that most people watching know best. John spent his entire adult life doing the same thing every Dutton before him had done, fighting to keep the land whole. He went up against developers with unlimited money and political connections. He went up against the machinery of government used as a weapon by people who had decided that Yellowstone was more valuable as a concept to be exploited than as a living, working ranch to be preserved. He even went up against people from inside his own circle who were willing to betray everything the Dutton name stood for in exchange for what they wanted. John fought all of it. He compromised in ways that cost him pieces of himself. He made decisions in the dark that he could never fully justify in the light. He gave everything. And in the end, despite all of it, John lost. The ranch that James built with his bare hands in the 1880s, the ranch that Jacob defended through impossible odds, the ranch that John poured his entire life into protecting. Gone. A wildfire. And the family that refused to break under enemies for over a century was finally forced to walk away from the only home they had ever known, not because they were beaten in a fight, not because they were outmaneuvered in a boardroom, but because the land itself, the thing they had sacrificed everything to hold on to, was taken by something they could not fight. That is the history Beth and Rip are carrying with them every single morning. They wake up at Rio Paloma. They did not come to Texas for a fresh start in the optimistic sense of that phrase. They came because there was nowhere else left. Because the alternative to planting themselves in the dry, difficult soil of South Texas was accepting that the Dutton story was finished. And neither Beth nor Rip is capable of accepting that. So they started again. And now someone is trying to take this from them too. And that context transforms everything about how you feel when you watch episode 9. This is not a ranch rivalry that has gotten out of hand. This is an attempt to finish what the fire in Montana started, to finally break a family that has survived everything for over 140 years. The people behind this attack, whoever gave the order that Rip is hunting and Beth is following through the money, may not fully understand what they have actually set in motion. They may have looked at the Duttons and seen a family that has already lost once. A family operating from a position of grief and displacement, rebuilding in unfamiliar territory. They may have calculated that they are easier to move now than they were in Montana. They may have been right about some of that. But what they missed, what everyone who has ever come at this family has always missed, is the thing that cannot be measured in resources or position or strategic advantage. The Duttons have been here before. They have stood at the edge of losing everything more times than any family should have to. And every single time, they found a way to survive. Not cleanly, not without loss. But they survived. And they came back stronger and more dangerous than before. Everything in episode 9 is pointed at the same destination. Every storyline, every character, every decision being made in this episode is a piece of a larger structure that is now almost fully assembled. And what that structure is building toward is the season finale, a collision that has been inevitable since the very first episode, but is now close enough that you can feel it pressing against everything happening on screen. Rob Will's takeover of 10 Petal Ranch is not stabilizing. It is accelerating the fracture that Beulah's collapse created. He is making the kind of decisions that feel like strength from the inside, but look like recklessness from every direction that matters. He is demanding loyalty from people who never gave it to him and have no reason to now. He is asserting dominance at moments that require patience. He is moving fast at a time when the only thing that might save 10 Petal Ranch is someone wise enough to slow down, assess what is actually happening, and make calculated choices rather than reactive ones. Rob Will is not that person. He has never been that person. And the people around him know it. Wacken knows it. And Wacken's silence is not going to hold much longer. Every day he watches his brother dismantle the legacy their mother built with reckless urgency, the cost of staying quiet increases. The moment Wacken makes his move, and that moment is coming in this episode or the one immediately after it, the Jackson family war stops being a background tension and becomes an open conflict that the Duttons can walk straight through. Because a family at war with itself cannot hold a ranch against an enemy at the same time. It simply cannot be done. And Beth already knows this. She has been watching the Jackson family the way a chess player watches pieces on a board, calculating not just where they are, but where they are going and what happens when they get there. Rip, meanwhile, is getting close. The investigation he has been running with that quiet, methodical patience is narrowing. The profile he has been building of the insider who fed intelligence into the attack is almost complete. When the name comes into focus, the response is not going to be a conversation. It is not going to be an accusation made in front of witnesses or a confrontation that gives anyone the opportunity to explain themselves or negotiate. When Rip Wheeler identifies the person who betrayed Rio Paloma from the inside, the resolution of that story is going to be absolute and immediate. And whatever ripple it sends through the people watching will tell you everything about who else inside Rio Paloma knew things they were not supposed to know. Beth's financial investigation is converging on something bigger than anyone has acknowledged out loud yet. The trail she is following does not end at a rival rancher with a grudge. It connects to institutional money, to organized power, to someone who has been positioning themselves to absorb Rio Paloma for much longer than the current conflict has been visible. That revelation, when it lands, is going to reframe every decision made in this season from the very beginning, because it means the war Beth and Rip have been fighting was not the war they were actually in. The visible conflict, the ranch rivalry, the attack, the daily friction, was designed to keep their attention on the surface while something much larger moved underneath. When Beth traces the money to its source and puts a name and a face and an institution to what has been done to them, the scale of the response required is going to change completely. And Carter is standing at a crossroads that this episode is going to force him to choose on. The drinking, the isolation, the spiral, none of that can continue past this point without consequences. Either Carter finds something to hold on to, something inside himself that is harder than the pain, and steps back into his role within this family at the moment they need every person present, or he does not. And if he does not, the cost of that absence in the finale is going to be felt in a way that nobody watching will be ready for. Because the Duttons have survived every external threat thrown at them for 140 years. But internal fractures, people cracking under the weight of grief and betrayal at the exact wrong moment, that has always been the thing that costs them the most. Whiskey Limits, Episode 8, was the episode where the fuse was lit. Every remaining illusion was stripped away. Every character was pushed past their limit. And now Episode 9 is the episode where everything ignites. The ranch war that has been building across this entire season is no longer approaching. It is here. The pieces are in place. The threads Beth and Rip have been pulling are almost at the point where they connect. The Jackson family is moments away from breaking open completely. And Carter is one decision away from either becoming who this life has been shaping him to be or losing himself entirely. 140 years of survival, 140 years of loss and rebuilding, and refusing to accept that the story was over. And it all comes down to what happens next in the dry, unforgiving heat of South Texas. The question this episode is asking, the question the whole season has been building toward, is not whether the Duttons can handle what is coming. They have handled everything. The question is whether what is finally coming for them is enough to finish what everyone before it failed to do. And that answer is almost here. Closer than any character in this story realizes. Closer than anyone watching is ready for. There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a story right before everything breaks open. Not the silence of nothing happening, the silence of everything happening at once beneath the surface. Invisible to most eyes, building pressure in every direction simultaneously until the structure holding it all in place finally gives way. That is the silence sitting over Dutton Ranch right now. And Episode 9 is the last moment before that silence ends. Every war has a point of no return, a moment where the conflict stops being something that could theoretically be negotiated, diffused, or walked back from, where the decisions made on both sides have accumulated to a weight that cannot be reversed by conversation or compromise or any version of peaceful resolution. The ranch war in South Texas crossed that line already. What is happening now is not a conflict that ends in a handshake. It ends in something absolute. And everyone who has been watching this story build knows it. The only question left is who is going to be standing when the smoke finally clears. Rob Will has positioned himself as the face of 10 Petal Ranch, but positioning and reality are two different things. The face of something means nothing if the body underneath it is rotting. And what Rob Will inherited when Beulah was pressured into naming him heir was not a stable empire ready to be handed off. He inherited a ranch already under siege, already carrying the weight of a war it did not start, with workers who are loyal to a legacy rather than to the man now claiming to represent it. The difference between those two things, loyalty to legacy versus loyalty to a person, is everything in a conflict like this one. Because loyalty to a legacy bends, it accommodates, it waits to see if the new leader can earn what he was given. But it has limits. And Rob Will has been testing those limits from the moment he stepped into that seat. Every decision he has made that prioritizes his ego over the ranch's survival is a withdrawal from an account that was never very full to begin with. The workers at 10 Petal Ranch are watching. They are calculating. They are making quiet internal decisions about how far they are willing to go for a man who does not lead the way Beulah led. And that calculation, happening simultaneously in the minds of every person whose loyalty Rob Will is depending on, is a slow-moving catastrophe that he cannot see because he is too focused on projecting strength to notice the ground shifting underneath him. By the time he feels it, the shift will already be complete. And the people who were supposed to hold 10 Petal Ranch together during the most dangerous moment in its history will have already made their choice about where they truly stand. On the other side of this war, Beth and Rip are closing in from two directions simultaneously. And the enemy, whoever sits at the top of the financial structure Beth is dismantling, whoever gave the order that set all of this in motion, is about to find out what it means to have both of them pointed at you at once. Because Beth and Rip are not interchangeable weapons. They are not two versions of the same approach. They are two completely different kinds of dangerous. And the combination of them working toward the same target from opposite directions is something that nobody in the history of this family's enemies has ever successfully survived. Rip brings the kind of force that ends things physically and completely. Beth brings the kind of precision that destroys everything a person built before they even see her coming. Together, they do not just win confrontations, they erase the thing that made the confrontation necessary in the first place. And that is exactly what the finale is going to demand. Because what Beth is uncovering in her financial investigation is not a single person with a grudge and resources. It is a structure. An organized, patient, sophisticated operation that has been running quietly underneath the surface of everything visible in this war. Someone built this. Someone invested real time and real money and real strategic thinking into a plan designed to remove the Duttons from South Texas permanently. That level of investment does not come from a ranching rival. It comes from someone who looked at Rio Paloma and saw something worth more than just the land. Something worth the risk and the cost and the complexity of what they set in motion. And when Beth finds the name at the center of that structure, when she traces the last thread back to the source, the revelation is going to reframe every single event of this season from the very beginning. Every attack, every pressure point, every moment where Beth and Rip felt the walls closing in. It was all connected. All of it was designed. And the designer is still out there, still watching, still believing that the plan is working. That belief is about to become the most expensive mistake anyone in this story has ever made. Because here is what every enemy of this family has always miscalculated. They look at the Duttons and they see what has been taken from them. They see Montana, they see the fire, they see a family operating from a position of loss, rebuilding in unfamiliar territory, running on grief and stubbornness, and the kind of desperate determination that looks, from the outside, like weakness waiting to be pushed past its limit. What they do not see, what they are never able to see until it is too late, is what that history actually built inside the people who survived it. Every loss the Dutton family absorbed over 140 years did not hollow them out. It compressed them. It turned grief into fuel, and trauma into clarity, and loss into the kind of absolute refusal to be broken that cannot be manufactured or purchased or strategically developed. It either exists in a person or it does not. And in Beth and Rip, it exists at a level that has never once been successfully extinguished. The finale approaching at the end of this season is not going to be a balanced conflict between two equal forces. It is going to be a reckoning. The kind that only happens when someone pushes the wrong family past the last available limit. When Rip's investigation and Beth's financial dismantling converge on the same name. When Wacken finally makes his move against Rob Will, when Carter steps back from the edge and decides what kind of man he is going to be, all of those threads are going to pull tight at the same moment, and the person, or the institution, or the organized power sitting at the center of this conspiracy is going to face something they never prepared for. Not a ranch family trying to survive, a Dutton family with nothing left to lose, nothing left to protect except the thing that cannot be taken by fire, or money, or strategy, or force. The name, the legacy, the 140 years of proof that this family does not end. Whatever is coming in the finale, whatever final collision this entire season has been building toward, it is no longer a question of whether the Duttons are ready for it. They were born ready for it. The only real question is whether the enemy on the other side of it understands what they actually started. And the answer to that question is going to determine everything about how this story ends. So here we are. Beulah is fighting for her life. Rob Will is making decisions that are cracking 10 Petal Ranch apart from the inside. Wacken is running out of time to choose a side. Rip is getting closer to a name that is going to shake Rio Paloma to its foundation. Beth is following money that leads somewhere far more dangerous than a simple ranch rivalry. And Carter is standing at the edge of a decision that could define who he is for the rest of his life. Every single thread in this story is converging. And the finale is no longer something on the horizon. It is the next thing that happens. So tell me this. Do you think the Duttons can survive what is coming? Or has this enemy finally figured out the thing that every other enemy has missed? Drop your answer below. Because before this season ends, we are going to find out if 140 years of survival is enough.